You've probably heard this explanation for bullying. Deep down, they're insecure, acting out from low self-esteem. It's one of the most repeated claims in pop psychology, and a substantial body of real research points the opposite direction. The actual psychology of bullying is more specific, more uncomfortable, and more useful to understand than secretly insecure. 5 real mechanisms, and one honest caveat, because understanding this psychology is about protection and prevention, not writing anyone off as unreachable.
Threatened egotism. Psychologist Roy Baumeister's research, along with colleagues Laura Smart and Joseph Bowden, examined the actual relationship between self-esteem and aggression, and found the popular story backwards. Aggression correlated less with low self-esteem and more with inflated, unstable self-regard, being threatened. A self-image that feels grand but is fragile, reacting forcefully when challenged or disrespected. Baumeister's team called this threatened egotism. This reframes bullying less as compensating for feeling small, and more as defending an inflated self-image that can't tolerate being questioned. The aggression isn't covering insecurity so much as protecting a self-concept that's genuinely unstable, not genuinely low. The tell. Notice what actually triggers the aggression. Genuine low self-esteem doesn't usually escalate sharply over perceived disrespect. Threatened egotism does, because the threat is to status, not to a stable low self-image that has nothing left to defend. If it's not about feeling weak, then bullying requires something else most people assume bullies lack entirely: real social skill. 2. The cold empathy. Empathy actually splits into 2 separate components in psychological research: cognitive empathy, understanding what someone else is thinking or feeling, theory of mind, and affective empathy, actually feeling concern or distress in response. Research by psychologists including Jamie Sutton, Peter Smith, and colleagues found that many bullies, especially the more strategic and successful ones, have intact or even above average cognitive empathy. They read social situations well, paired with low affective empathy, meaning they understand exactly what will hurt someone without feeling any pull to avoid causing it. This is a specific and uncomfortable finding. Effective bullying often requires social intelligence, not a lack of it. The gap isn't in understanding others, it's in caring about what they understand. The tell? A bully who consistently targets a genuine, specific vulnerability isn't failing to read the room. They're reading it accurately and proceeding anyway. So how does someone act this way without the ordinary guilt that would normally stop it? There's a specific, documented mechanism for that too. 3. Moral disengagement. Psychologist Albert Bandura's later work identified moral disengagement, a set of specific cognitive strategies people use to deactivate their own moral self-sanctions, allowing harmful behavior without the guilt that would normally follow. Several show up constantly in bullying. Euphemistic labeling. It was just a joke. Diffusion of responsibility. Everyone was doing it. And attribution of blame. They were asking for it. These aren't necessarily conscious lies. They function as genuine cognitive permission. The behavior gets reframed until it no longer registers as the kind of thing that requires guilt. This is also why direct confrontation, that really hurts someone, sometimes fails to land. The disengagement has already reclassified the act as something other than harm.
The tell? Listen for the specific reframing. It's not that serious. They took it wrong. I didn't mean it like that. These are moral disengagement doing exactly what Bandura's research says it does. None of this happens in a vacuum either. There's usually a clear social function underneath it.
4. Bullying as a status strategy. Researchers, including Anthony Pellegrini and Jeffrey Long, studied bullying, particularly in early adolescence, as what they describe as a resource control strategy, a deliberate, if often unconscious, method for establishing dominance and status within a social hierarchy, rather than simply random cruelty. Their research found bullying often peaks specifically during the transitions when social hierarchies are being renegotiated, and frequently targets peers in ways that visibly demonstrate dominance to an audience. This explains a detail that's otherwise puzzling. A lot of bullying happens in front of others, not in private. If the function were only personal satisfaction, an audience wouldn't matter. If the function is establishing status, the audience is the entire point.
The tell, bullying that requires witnesses to feel complete, is functioning as a status display, not just as an isolated act of aggression. This pattern doesn't stop at the schoolyard either. The adult version has its own well-documented personality profile.
5. Dark Triad Correlates in adult bullying. Research on workplace bullying specifically has found meaningful correlations with the dark triad, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and subclinical psychopathy. Each contributes something distinct. Machiavellianism supplies the strategic, unemotional manipulation. Narcissism supplies the threatened egotism reactivity from earlier. And psychopathy supplies the low affective empathy that allows the behavior to continue without internal friction. This matters practically. Adult bullying is rarely reducible to poor social skills or unresolved insecurity. In a meaningful number of documented cases, it's a stable personality pattern, which is part of why workplace bullying tends to resist simple conflict resolution approaches that work for ordinary disagreements. The pattern isn't a misunderstanding to be cleared up.
The honest caveat. One distinction matters before closing this out. These 5 mechanisms describe patterns found in research, not a diagnosis of every person who has ever bullied someone. Especially in children and teenagers, bullying behavior is frequently situational, modeled from aggression witnessed at home, a response to being bullied elsewhere, or a temporary status strategy in an unstable social environment. And it's often genuinely responsive to intervention, particularly programs that rebuild affective empathy directly, rather than just punishing the behavior.
The dark triad and threatened egotism patterns describe a smaller, more entrenched subset, especially in adults with a long track record of this behavior. Understanding which pattern you're actually dealing with changes what kind of response, protection, intervention, or simply distance, is actually appropriate. So, not low self-esteem, but often an inflated, threatened one. Not a lack of understanding, but frequently a lack of caring paired with real social skill. A specific set of cognitive permissions that neutralize guilt. A status strategy that needs an audience. And, in a meaningful subset of adult cases, a stable personality profile that doesn't respond to simple conflict resolution. None of this is about excusing the behavior. It's about seeing it accurately enough to actually protect yourself or someone else from it, which they're just insecure rarely does. If you want the practical follow-up, how to actually respond to each of these patterns differently, let me know in the comments.